In the name of Allah, the most gracious and the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum to all. Welcome to Virtual Learning System of Pakistan International School Thai. Dear students, I hope you all are fine. Now today we are going to start unit number 7, pollination and fertilization. This is your science book. Open your books and come on page number 39. Pollination and fertilization in plants. First of all, we are going to read this page. Students, if we observe the following picture, why do you think this butterfly is dancing over the flower? It is dancing over the flower in search of its food. In fact, it is helping human beings. How can this tiny creature help human beings? Let's find out. Students, you know that a flower is the most beautiful and brightest part of a plant. The flower helps the plant to make copies of itself. Flowers may look different from each other, but they all have the same parts. Here you see some plants grow many flowers on one stem, like bluebells. See here, in bluebells plant have many flowers on one stem, but in poppy plant only one flower in one stem. Students, if we open flower, the open flower is the most attractive part are the petals. If you see, the most attractive part of the flower is petals. The petals main color depending on the flower. After the small prominent leaf-like structure on the bud are known as sepal. In the next images, I will explain you one by one. First of all, here you see the butterfly is dancing over the flower in search of its food. In this image, you will see the butterfly is dancing over the flower in search of its food. Structure of a flower. A flower is composed of the following part. The first one is petals. I tell you before, the petals are vary in color depending on the flower. And the petal are the most beautiful part of a flower. They are brightly colored to attract insects and birds to the flower. See, in this image, petals is the most attractive and beautiful part of the flower. After here you see the leaf-like structure. These are leaf-like structure or green in color are called sepal. And these are leaf-like green structure and are attached to the base of the flower. The sepal protected the flower when it was a young bud. All the sepals together are called calyx. So the small prominent leaf-like structure on the bud are known as sepal. If we cut the flower open, we can see the parts inside and can identify the pistil and the stamen also. Here you see the pistil, this one. This is the female part of the flower and consists of three parts. That one called stigma, style, and ovary. Stigma, style, and ovary. Here you see stigma. This part is called stigma. The tip of the carpel is called the stigma. It is sticky and traps pollen grains. After here, it is a long hollow tube that connects the stigma to the ovary. This long hollow tube connects the stigma to the ovary. After here, ovary, this is a female reproductive organ of the plant. After fertilization, the ovary becomes the fruits and the ovules become the seed. So this one is called the female reproductive organ of a flower. Stamen, this is the male part of the flower. It consists of anther and filament. The anther contains a yellow dust called pollen, and filament is a supportive structure. The filaments support the anther. Before the development of flower and seed, a flower goes through two different processes known as pollination and fertilization. Pollination and fertilization. I hope you understand this page. Again, I repeat for you. A flower is composed of the following parts. Number one, the petals are the most attractive part of the flower. After the leaf-like structure, that structure are attached to the base of a flower is called sepal. Then pistil or carpel, it means stigma, style and ovary. Stigma, style and ovary. And these are the female reproductive organs. After stamen is the male reproductive organ, that one called anther. This one is a supportive structure called filament. So these are the male reproductive organs in plants, and these are the female reproductive organs in plants. Here you see female reproductive organs, stigma, style and ovary, anther, filament. So stigma, top of the pistil, sticky surface for pollen to stuck to or stick to. Style connects the stigma to the ovary. And the next one is ovary, contains ovules called eggs. Stamen, this one is called anther, produced female nuclei enclosed by pollen grain. Filament hold the anther up. See, this is a supportive structure. It holds the anther up. So these are the female reproductive organs and these are the male reproductive organs. I hope you understand. Again, here you see this one is called yellow dust-like structure called pollen. That one called stigma, and this long hollow tube called style. Stigma, style, and ovary. In flower, this is the structure of flower. Internal structure of flower, stigma, style, and ovary. Again, here you see stigma. This one is a pollen grain, style, and that one called ovary. This one called anther and filament. Again, here I show you the image of structure of flower. This is a simple structure. You know that this is flower, bud, leaf, root, and here you see stigma, internal structure of a flower, stigma, style, and ovary. And that one is the yellow part is called anther and filament. Students, you keep remember all these parts of a flower. Again, here I show you anther. After this one is called filament, stigma, style, and ovary. Same one, stigma, style, and ovary. You just keep remember these parts, anther and filament. Petals, this colored part is called petal, leaf-like structure called sepal. Again here you see anther, that one is called filament, stigma, style, ovary, petal and sepal. Here you see flower, pistil. This structure show you stamen, petal. This is simple stem, leaf. Again here you see petal, sepal, anther, filament, stigma, style and ovary. Again here you see sepal, petal. This one is sepal. That one colored part of flower is called petal. That one is internal structure, stigma, style, ovary, anther and filament. The next topic is pollination. Students, what is pollination? Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower. The pollen grains can also be transferred from one flower to another flower. So pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower. And the pollen grains can also be transferred from one flower to another flower. See, this one is called pollen grain. So the pollen grain can also be transferred from one flower to another flower. Pollination, we have two types of pollination, self-pollination and cross-pollination. First of all, here you see the self-pollination. Pollen from the anther is transferred to the stigma. It is called self-pollination. In step 1, pollen comes loose from stamen. See? After the second step, a pistil of the same flower collects pollen. So this image shows you the self-pollination in plants. This image shows you the cross-pollination in plants. Here you see the pollen grains, the yellow dot-like structure. This one is called pollen. After that one is called pollinator. When this pollen is transferred through this pollinator to another flower, so this pollination called cross-pollination. So if the pollen grain of a flower falls through the pollinator onto the stigma of another flower, it is called cross-pollination. Again here you see this one is called pollen grain. And this pollen grain, this one is show you the anther. See, this one is seed. When it will be fall onto the stigma of the flower. This is a structure of seed. This one is called embryo. That one is show you ovary. This one is called ovule. When this turns to seed. And this one is turned into fruits. So ovary turn to fruit and ovule turn to seed. Keep remember. After the fertilization, ovary turns to fruit and ovule turn to seed. Now, what is pollination? This is the actual definition. The transfer of a pollen grains from anther to stigma is known as pollination. If there is no pollination, there are no fruits and seeds to eat. So we have the two kinds of pollination, self-pollination. If the pollen of flower falls onto the stigma of the same flower, it is called self-pollination. I told you before, pollen of a flower falls onto the stigma of the same flower, it is called self-pollination. And cross-pollination, if the pollen grains of a flower falls onto the stigma of another flower, it is called cross-pollination. See here, in this flower, the self-pollination takes place. See, this anther falls onto the stigma of the same flower, and here the pollen grains get stuck to the bee when it visits a flower. After the bee travels to another plant of the same type, then the pollen grains falls onto the stigma and pollination take place. In cross-pollination, pollen grains get back, get stuck to the pollen when it stuck to the bee when it visits a flower, and the bee travels to another plant or the same type. After the pollen grains falls onto the stigma and pollination take place. Okay, here you see in self-pollination, see this anther is fall onto the stigma of the same flower, but in cross-pollination, anther falls to another flower. It is called cross-pollination. This process will also show you the cross-pollination. These are the pollen grains when it moves, and when this bee visit a flower, the pollen grain gets stuck to the bee, and when the bee travel to another plants of the same type, and the pollen grain falls onto the stigma and pollination take place. After here you see again, this is called pollen, this is a flower, this one is called petal, that one called sepal, stem, root, and this bee or butterfly called pollinator. How many types of pollination? Self-pollination and cross-pollination. Keep remember, self-pollination take place to the same flower, and cross-pollination take place to the another flower, from one flower to another flower, but the same type of plant. Cross-pollination, here see anther, pollen, and that one is stigma. Self-pollination, anther, stigma, same flower. Cross-pollination take place from one flower to another flower. If the pollen grains of a flower falls onto the stigma of the another flower, it is called cross-pollination. Self-pollination, if the pollen of flower falls onto the stigma of the same flower, it is called self-pollination. Self-pollination, plant fertilize its own eggs. Keep remember, plant fertilizes its own eggs. Again, here you see pollination of plants. This one show you the cross pollination, and that one show you the self pollination. This pollination take place through the pollinators, and that one, this pollination, self pollination, take place in the same flower. Again, here you see the definition of self-pollination. It is a transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same plant. So that one called the self-pollination. Okay, dear students, I hope you understand page number 39 and 40 and 41. Inshallah, next lecture we will discuss page 42 and 43. Okay, students, stay home, stay safe.